Between Europe's northwestern borders lies the North Sea, a space where the wind shapes the horizon and currents draw invisible trajectories that have determined routes, borders, and ways of life for centuries. Its constant force sustains an astonishing biodiversity in which each organism has developed precise responses to a changing and demanding environment. From the surface, the ocean appears calm, steady waves, light reflected in flashes. But beneath that appearance, a contrasting reality unfolds. The upper layers, bathed in sunlight, are a stage of incessant movement, where every shadow and every impulse mark the difference between survival and death. Every day, the light directs the rhythms of life in this illuminated area, establishing a seemingly stable order. But as it descends, that order dissolves. Colors fade, sound fades into distant echoes, and pressure begins to take hold, revealing a very different world beneath the surface. In these depths, where temperatures barely rise above freezing, live creatures that seem from another planet, fish with enormous jaws, translucent organisms that float in slow motion, and predators that generate their own light to hunt in the darkness. Each adaptation is an ingenious way to survive where energy is scarce and light never reaches. But this kingdom, isolated for millions of years, continues to pose questions that defy our understanding. How do they manage to thrive in a place where the pressure would crush any known life form? What secrets do these depths hold about the very history of life on Earth? Although these questions about the depths may seem distant, life in the ocean is intimately connected at all its layers. Every interaction in the depths influences what happens at the surface, because the remains of prey that fall as marine snow feed organisms that will then serve as food for predators in the illuminated zone. In this way, what happens in the dark affects the light, and activity on the surface reflects the dance of life taking place below. Furthermore, the movements of schools of fish on the surface generate patterns that can be perceived even at depths of several meters. The dark and the light, the slow and the fast, the gigantic and the minuscule, intertwine to form a single fabric of life that unfolds continuously from the surface to the abyss. In the zone of light, where the sun's rays penetrate most strongly, the web of life in the North Sea begins to reveal its rules. Currents mark natural routes, and cycles of light and darkness dictate the rhythm of activity, creating an environment in which survival depends on the precision and timing of every movement. In this violent scenario, even a shadow can decide who lives and who is persecuted. Schools of fish react to the slightest change, bending and twisting as a single organism, aware that every current, every flash of light, and every movement of their predators can be decisive. And there, amid the flow of bodies and shadows, the sharks appear. Their advance is silent, almost imperceptible, a calculated glide that cuts through the schools with lethal calm. Every move reveals the precision of a trained hunter, alert to any sign of vulnerability and capable of turning the slightest opportunity into a lethal attack. Their skill directs the catch and simultaneously shapes the behavior of the entire school of fish, as they act as true architects of fear throughout every meter of water they travel. This influence translates into measured movements. Sharks wait for groups to separate, conserve energy, and attack with precision. Each charge combines patience, calculation, and reflexes honed over millions of years of adaptation, supported by a body perfectly adapted for hunting. Their teeth and jaws are true evolutionary weapons, capable of tearing flesh with maximum efficiency. Each row of teeth is constantly replaced, When one is lost or worn down, another advances to take its place, ensuring that the teeth are always ready to hunt. The effectiveness of the dentition depends on the support of the robust and perfectly articulated jaw, which balances strength and speed to immobilize the prey without wasting energy or compromising the predator's stability. Although powerful, the jaw alone does not guarantee success. Each thrust reaches its true potential when the shark controls each movement with precision. Its dorsal, pectoral, and caudal fins act in perfect harmony, giving it stability, control, and maneuverability. The dorsal fin maintains balance and prevents uncontrolled turns. The pectoral fins adjust direction and depth, and the caudal fin generates the thrust needed for ultra-fast acceleration. This combination of strength and control not only ensures hunting, but also shapes the behavior of prey and the distribution of fish schools. Because their constant vigilance forces schools of fish to move in a synchronized manner, creating movement patterns that run throughout the entire water column. Every turn, acceleration, or break in the school triggers a chain reaction. The energy and attention of each organism adapt to the shark's commands, maintaining the surface's balance through this precise interaction between hunter and prey. This environmental control isn't limited to strength or speed. For hunting to be effective and sustained, the shark needs something more. It requires the ability to remain unnoticed and hidden until the exact moment of the attack. Its stealth begins with camouflage that blends with the hues of the water. The dorsal part, a dark grey or almost black, blends into the deep shadows of the ocean, while the ventral area, lighter and silvery, blends with the light coming from the surface. The texture of its skin and subtle shading patterns help blur its silhouette, preventing its body contours from being detectable by its prey. These adaptations allow their presence to go unnoticed even in clear waters, or when approaching from unexpected angles, causing their silhouette to disappear amidst light and shadow, almost as if the sea had completely absorbed them. This unnoticed appearance is complemented by a silent gait capable of avoiding any turbulence that might betray its presence. For this almost invisible movement to be effective, the shark needs to accurately perceive every detail of its surroundings. Its camouflage and mobility give it an advantage, but its hunting success also depends on something else. To remain almost imperceptible while approaching its prey, the shark relies on a highly specialized sensory system. Beyond sight, this predator uses a network of receptors that detect the smallest vibrations caused by the movement of prey and currents, while its lateral lines pick up changes in direction and speed from any nearby movement. Each signal is processed immediately, allowing the environment to be interpreted with a level of detail that goes beyond the visible. This sensory precision allows it to locate prey even in low visibility conditions, such as fish hiding among rocks, cephalopods gliding among algae, or small crustaceans seeking shelter. Thanks to this ability, the shark can identify the position and behavior of each target without relying solely on light or the obvious movement of schools of fish. All this preparation results in an act of extreme precision. The coordination of senses, instinct, and anatomy allows each attack to be calculated down to the millimeter, as the slightest error can mean losing the opportunity to capture the prey or wasting energy. And this precision isn't limited to the moment of the attack, but begins long before, during the long patrols in which the shark analyzes every sign of vulnerability in the environment before deciding when to act. During these trips, although much of its attention is focused on the moving schools of fish, the shark also devotes time to searching for solitary prey, precisely scanning every corner of the seabed. Among the cracks and undulations of the bedrock, a flatfish remains motionless, trying to go unnoticed, while the shark detects it precisely before its prey even suspects its presence. Hunting these individual prey requires a more subtle approach. The shark advances silently, modulating each movement to follow the target's position and take advantage of the direction of the currents. The flatfish, alert to a subtle change in the current and the shadows surrounding it, briefly senses the shark's presence and reacts frantically, trying to escape as the predator adjusts its trajectory with almost imperceptible precision. For a brief moment, the fish manages to dodge a partial charge, zigzagging through the crevices of the bedrock, but the shark corrects its course with lethal calm, closing the distance with measured, silent movements. In an instant, the final blow slices through the water, kicking up fine particles that envelop the scene in a halo of tension. A flash of blood dissolves in the currents as the shark captures its target, then disappears into the darkness, leaving behind a momentarily shaken but vibrant ecosystem, constantly readjusting. As the shark retreats after securing its target, the bedrock is disturbed by the sudden movement, and small creatures nearby react to the change. The capture of the flatfish creates a vacuum that disrupts the disposition of other solitary prey, some moving quickly to new crevices and others pausing in alert. Every vibration and every shadow transmits danger signals, immediately reorganizing the dynamics of the microecosystem around the rock, showing how the action of a single predator can impact a delicate balance of life beneath the surface. This dynamic demonstrates that, in the illuminated zone, a predator's impact extends far beyond the immediate capture, reorganizing the environment and generating new opportunities for those who know how to take advantage of them. Who will dare to descend upon this newly created chaos and take advantage of the confusion that lies beneath the surface? From the cliffs overlooking the North Sea, a group of seals watches closely, assessing the movements of the sharks and the dispersal caused by their hunting. His eyes follow every ripple and every flash on the surface, measuring the distance and calculating the exact moment to act. They feel that any mistake could mean missing the perfect opportunity, or worse, becoming prey to the sharks themselves, so every move must be carefully calculated before taking to the sea. With a precise thrust, they project from the rock and cross the border between air and water, plowing across the surface with a combination of strength and delicacy. Every move is calculated instantly, taking advantage of the vacuum left by the shark's activity to capture prey on the fly and retreat before exposing themselves to danger. The coordination between head, fins, and body turns the chase into an act of almost choreographic efficiency, reflecting how these specimens perceive and respond to every opportunity that arises in the ecosystem. This precision is not achieved through strength alone, as the seal's agility depends as much on their muscular power as on the precision of their senses. Their vision, adapted to respond to both bright light and underwater darkness, captures flashes of movement at the surface and in the shallowest layers of the water, while the touch of their whiskers detects even the most subtle vibrations, from the flapping of a fish's wings to the change in the current as a school begins to disperse. Every detail is interpreted in fractions of a second, and your reaction is the result of an evolution that perfected the ability to strike accurately without endangering your own safety. All this sensory precision, however, does not occur in isolation, as seals synchronize their attacks, sometimes unconsciously, with the movements generated by sharks and other predators. They take advantage of the chaos created by unexpected attacks or turns, penetrating fragmented schools and selecting prey that have been left behind or disoriented. The pressure they exert is not limited to their direct victims. Their presence modifies the density and speed of schools, redistributes fish, and opens spaces that can be exploited by other animals, creating a complex and dynamic network of interactions. Although their size doesn't rival that of sharks, seals bring a different dimension to the ecosystem. They are specialists in mobility and strategy, capable of quickly taking advantage of any opportunity their environment presents. In the delicate balance of the surface, their maneuvers act as a reminder that the pressure on life doesn't always come from the largest predator, but from those who know how to move with cunning and impeccable timing. But despite their speed and precision, the seals do not completely master this illuminated surface. Every twist and every shark lunge leaves them room to exploit, but it also proves that there is an actor capable of outperforming even these experts, who could then impose absolute control over this environment where every movement is observed, measured, and exploited. This predator does not act individually. It organizes, coordinates, and executes the hunt with a level of complexity that no other specimen achieves. As the pressure of sharks and seals transforms life in the zone of light, an even more formidable architect prepares to intervene, redistributing roles surrounding prey and executing attacks that seem choreographed down to the last detail. On the surface appears the orca, a social predator that dominates the environment with impeccable teamwork. Each of their movements does not replace the sharks or seals, but rather intertwines with their actions, forming a network of strategies that turns the illuminated column into a space of constant interaction. The combination of all these predators establishes a relentless rhythm where the behavior of each species impacts and adapts to that of the others, generating an unstoppable flow of tension and survival. Herring and mackerel banks react immediately to this multiple pressure. They move like fluid organisms, bending, expanding, and adjusting density and speed depending on the approaching predator. Each twist and turn accurately reflects the detected threat, transforming these prey into active performers of the hunting choreography. But the orca's skill isn't limited to superficial coordination. Each member of the pod plays a strategic role. Some dominate the flank of the school, while others act as decoys, luring prey to areas controlled by their peers. The distribution of functions is not fixed and adapts immediately to the responses of the schools and the position of sharks and seals, demonstrating a level of social intelligence and tactical flexibility rarely seen in the animal kingdom. This group precision creates a domino effect throughout the ecosystem. The sudden dispersal of a school of fish creates opportunities for birds that capture prey in flight, small predators that lurk in the confusion, and even jellyfish and floating organisms that move along currents altered by the pursuit. Each attack thus becomes a trigger of activity and movement that spreads throughout the entire water column. Each attack thus becomes a trigger for activity that extends throughout the entire water column, and in the midst of this controlled chaos, the orcas adjust their hunting strategy based on the local topography and currents, while assessing every gap and every variation in the terrain. They take advantage of depth variations, crevices in sandbanks, and sheltering positions of prey to reduce effort and increase efficiency. For all these reasons, nothing is left to chance for them, as each maneuver arises from observation, experience, and the constant interaction between predators and prey. The dynamics between sharks, seals, and orcas turn the surface of the North Sea into a scene of constant tension. Competition for space and food forces predators to continually adapt, while prey develop collective defense strategies, generating a flow of action and reaction that allows for no pause. And as we've seen, this ecosystem is not static, but a living organism where energy circulates from one actor to another, and each movement triggers consequences that propagate in all directions. As the dance of predator and prey reaches its climax, the zone of light reveals itself as a theater where coordination, cunning, and anticipation determine who survives and who is left behind. While sharks, seals, and orcas dominate the surface, the deeper layers and mid-waters of the ocean remain relatively calm, where light barely filters through and movements are slow and calculated. There, less visible ecosystems unfold, populated by species that take advantage of the stillness and pressure to move and hunt discreetly. What creatures adapted to darkness and extreme pressure silently wait for surface activity to create opportunities, and how will they respond when their turn to hunt comes? Between the intervening currents, an elusive inhabitant moves with precise movements, adapted to life between the diffuse light of the surface and the growing darkness of the depths. At night, it ascends to illuminated levels to feed, and at dawn it descends to darker levels, avoiding the attention of larger predators. Their rhythm of movement establishes a dynamic link between different ocean levels, following the flow of zooplankton and small fish, and modulating their position according to food availability and the presence of threats. In this way, each ascent or descent is not just an individual movement. It acts as a silent motor that connects the activity of the different layers, transmitting changes and adjusting the flow of organisms as it passes. Every movement of the squid reflects its mastery of the space between layers, and this precision naturally extends to its limbs because its tentacles are finely tuned instruments for detecting and capturing prey. In addition, they are equipped with sensitive suction cups that detect the slightest vibrations in the water, allowing them to identify moving prey without producing waves perceptible to other predators. These sensory abilities are integrated with the coordination of its entire body, as the extensions and contractions of its tentacles are calculated and precise, while its movements intertwine with the current and the position of its victims, making capture an act of almost choreographic synchronization. Additionally, its large, adaptable eyes allow it to clearly observe both dark and brightly lit spaces, giving it an advantage in environments where visibility is constantly fluctuating. Its propulsion is equally astonishing. Using targeted jets of water, the squid can accelerate sharply, dodge threats, or chase prey with maneuverability that challenges most of its rivals. When danger threatens, the squid masterfully deploys its defenses. The ink is released like a dark curtain, a veil that disorients predators as they flee. His movements aren't just about flight. Every maneuver is calculated to conserve energy and stay within the zones he knows best, where pressure and darkness are his allies rather than obstacles. In this scenario, the squid hunts and defends itself while interacting with the broader ecosystem. Its nocturnal ascent to shallower waters alters the dynamics of fish schools and zooplankton, regulating their dispersal and triggering adaptive responses that extend to several water layers. It is a predator that respects the rhythms of the ocean, that moves with intelligence and flexibility, and whose existence demonstrates that marine life is not organized by chance, but by interconnected strategies refined over millions of years. However, even the master of change finds limits. The surface and its predators also have their own realms, and although the squid master's transitions, its cunning is tested daily, and today will be no exception. What will happen when these worlds collide and one of the most formidable predators on the surface decides to invade their territory? The beginning of this confrontation occurs silently, when a school of small, deep-water pelagic fish gathers at a point where currents deposit organic debris. This density of prey attracts two hunters who rarely meet so close together. On one side, the squid, fresh from its nocturnal ascent, perceives the fish's minimal vibrations, and on the other, a shark that has entered the darkness following the same trail of life. In an ocean where energy is rapidly dispersed, sharing such a compact resource means entering into direct competition. Neither side is willing to give in. The shark advances, confident in its size and the strength of its jaws, slicing through the water with the calmness that precedes an attack. The squid retreats for a moment, assessing the situation before propelling itself forward with a surge, extending its tentacles like a living net. The school disperses in seconds, and with it, the possibility of an easy feast disappears. Tension turns to commotion, and the shark lunges, seeking to capture the cephalopod in a single bite. But the squid responds with speed and precision as it dodges and twists to attach itself to the shark's side using its toothed suction cups that dig into its rough surface. The shark shakes its body violently, creating a swirl of bubbles as each jerk tears away the suction and skin, leaving red furrows opening between the dermis. There is no sound, just the tension of the water and the quick bursts of light that the squid emits as signals. The shark, unable to free itself immediately, turns around, trying to bite whatever is holding it. Its snout grazes a tentacle, bites it, and tears off a fragment that floats like a dark trail. The squid, wounded but not defeated, releases a cloud of ink that spreads like a black blanket in the darkness. The shark is blinded and for a few seconds relies only on its sense of smell. It is at this point that the cephalopod takes advantage of the confusion and spirals away at high speed, while launching bursts of pressurized water to increase the distance. The shark follows it by inertia, but every meter traveled is energy lost. And at these depths, energy is everything. Neither of them can afford to continue. A victory would mean being exhausted and vulnerable to other hunters. The chase is interrupted as if it had never begun, and the shark reduces its speed, descending into another corridor of shadows in search of easier prey. The squid, still emitting bioluminescent flashes, plunges into the darkness, bearing with it the marks of the confrontation and the certainty that in this ocean, strength does not always define hierarchy. Cunning and opportunity weigh equally. As the surface continues its choreography of light and hunting, the consequences unfold beneath the limits of clarity. The debris from the great chases above descends as marine snow, a drizzle of organic particles that feeds organisms at twilight and further down on the seafloor. What happens when we continue to descend? When the blue turns to black and the pressure forces us to reinvent our bodies and our behavior? What life forms have chosen this perpetual silence as their home, and what impossible strategies have they deployed to turn the inhospitable into routine? We're about to cross the threshold. From here, every meter we descend takes us further away from the familiar and closer to a world that, for almost all of our history, existed unseen. At 200 meters deep, the ocean ceases to be a familiar space and sunlight dissipates along with life as we know it on the surface. It is at this point that the bathyal zone begins, an immense realm that extends to a depth of 4,000 meters. Here, the darkness is almost absolute. The cold remains constant at around 4 degrees Celsius, and the pressure can be up to 400 times greater than atmospheric pressure. However, in this hostile environment, life not only exists but also organizes itself into a surprisingly efficient ecosystem. At the surface, phytoplankton convert sunlight into energy, supporting food webs that feed fish, sharks, and whales. But none of that is evident down here. Here, the engine of life is something more humble, a constant drizzle of organic matter known as marine snow. They are microscopic fragments of phytoplankton, zooplankton feces, remains of jellyfish and small fish that, after dying, begin a silent journey to the depths. To the human eye, they might appear to be specks of dust suspended in the darkness, but to the inhabitants of these waters, they represent the most valuable resource because each particle comes from a distant world and feeds the entire chain. The first to benefit from this rain are deep-sea copepods and crustaceans, which filter the water for these invisible particles. Their activity concentrates the ocean's energy on small organisms and provides food for larger species, making them an essential component of this deep-sea ecosystem. Further down, polychaete worms colonize the sediment and feed on the remains that manage to reach the bottom. Their presence allows nutrients to continue circulating and prevents organic matter from accumulating inertly, keeping the energy flow in the water column active. Among these consumers are small carnivores that depend on this food chain. Fish like the lanternfish take advantage of the abundance of prey and, with their disproportionately large jaws, can swallow prey whole when the opportunity arises, demonstrating that hunting efficiency depends on specialized adaptations and synchronization with the activity of filter feeders. Following the same line of specialized predators, the viperfish lurks in the shadows with its slender body and sharp fangs. Its patience is constant, feeding on marine snow when the opportunity is scarce, but it is designed to take advantage of any carelessness of smaller prey. Their strategy is to expend little energy, move just enough, and strike with lethal precision when something gets too close, subtly integrating themselves into this web of interactions. Not all inhabitants of this kingdom are hunters or prey. Recyclers, such as deep-sea crabs, play a fundamental role in the material cycle. When a fish dies, its remains are not wasted, because these scavengers detect the smell and quickly come to feast. Small invertebrates, such as amphipods, also make their way among them, devouring microscopic fragments. What these organisms leave behind is used by bacteria that break down complex compounds into simple nutrients. These nutrients, through upwelling currents, fertilize surface waters and promote new phytoplankton blooms, completing a life cycle that connects the depths to the surface and demonstrates the efficiency and interconnectedness of this ecosystem. In the depths of the ocean, a cycle unfolds that escapes the human eye but is essential for marine life. Every particle that descends, every organism that participates in nutrient recycling has an effect that extends to the surface, ensuring the sea maintains its biological balance and preventing the accumulation of harmful waste. In this constant flux, an extraordinary event occasionally occurs that concentrates and multiplies the available energy. When an old shark dies at the surface or a whale perishes in the open sea, its 1 metric ton body slowly sinks to the seafloor. For the inhabitants of the abyss, it is the equivalent of an entire city falling from the sky, a banquet that attracts first the great scavengers and then a whole chain of organisms that will exploit every piece for days and even years. First come deep-sea fish that tear at the soft flesh, then crabs that tear off smaller pieces, and finally, when only the bones remain, specialized bacteria break them down, releasing nutrients into the sediment for years so that nothing goes to waste. Can you imagine what would happen if all the bones of dead species accumulated over millions of years? The sea would literally be filled with skeletons, an immense cemetery that would house the memory of every creature that ever sailed its waters. But instead of turning into a complete disaster, this silent process becomes a vital cog. Each fragment, each released molecule, nourishes life anew, keeping active a cycle that connects the deepest part with the surface. In this way, what happens in the depths doesn't stay there. The released nutrients, decomposed particles, and carbon remnants are part of a flow that transcends the abyss, reaches upper layers, and affects processes that regulate the chemistry and life of the entire ocean. Thus, beneath its surface, agitated by storms and tides, the North Sea preserves a silent system that maintains the stability of the global ocean. But this calm is not absolute, because in the deepest darkness move creatures that seem to have come out of a nightmare. Adapted to pressure, darkness, and scarcity, they have developed forms, weapons, and strategies that defy all logic. What are these creatures like, and how do they hunt in a place where there is no light, no sound, and no possible shelter? Among the shadows, a silhouette begins to take shape, slowly lengthening its slender body in absolute darkness. It is one of those predators that inhabit the abyss, and although small compared to some giants, its presence imposes absolute silence in the water column. The viperfish moves with deliberate slowness between 500 and 2,000 meters deep, where light never reaches, and its jaws, disproportionately large and armed with needle-like curved teeth, seem designed not to tear, but to catch slippery prey and prevent it from escaping. Their existence depends on a delicate balance between the need to feed and energy conservation. In these waters, where pressure is overwhelming and food is scarce, every movement represents a considerable expense. That's why the viperfish adopts a patient strategy. It remains motionless for long periods, hidden in the shadows, waiting for something to catch up to it. Sometimes it's a copepod that gets too close. Other times it's a fragment of organic matter slowly descending from the surface in the form of marine snow. This unpredictability forces him to be selective. His diet is as diverse as opportunity allows. In this realm of darkness, patience is the only guarantee of survival. Everything about its body reinforces this strategy. Nothing in its anatomy is superfluous. Every feature, from its fangs that protrude even with its mouth closed to its eyes, adapted to capture the slightest glimmer of bioluminescent light, responds to a single need: to hunt in the deepest darkness. That image, with a thin body suspended in the void, teeth like needles and eyes fixed on nothingness, embodies the harshness of life in the abyss. But not everyone in the abyss hunts the same way. While the viperfish remains suspended in the water column waiting for live prey, on the seafloor the dynamics are different, and the fight for resources takes on a different form. There, among motionless shadows and soft sediments, life moves forward at a different pace. On those continental slopes, something moves at a calculated pace. The deep-sea crab, with its firm and precise claws, scans every corner for remains. This crustacean is a scavenger par excellence. It lives between 200 and 1,000 meters below the surface in a world where only small amounts of organic matter descend from above reach it. For him, a piece of dead fish, a detached shark spine, or even compact flakes of marine snow represent an opportunity he cannot pass up. Its importance lies in what it symbolizes: absolute recycling. When prey escapes its predators, when the remains of a lifetime end up at the bottom, the crab is there to decompose them and reintegrate them into the cycle. It competes with polychaete worms and other invertebrates for the same resources, creating a microcosm of silent struggle. In contrast to the aggressiveness of the viperfish, this specimen offers a more humble but equally vital story. While the former captures prey in an instant, the latter can take hours to fragment a carcass. Two opposing strategies and two ways of adapting to the same law, taking advantage of what the ocean offers, because nothing is guaranteed. These protagonists show us a fragment of the invisible balance that sustains the North Sea in its darkest layers. But the abyss harbors even stranger creatures with adaptations that defy logic and make these early actors seem like mere apprentices in danger. What other life forms lurk in this lightless realm? As we descend, the silence thickens and the pressure turns the darkness into a physical weight. We leave the anglerfish behind, with its enormous mouth and theatrical hunting, to discover that not everyone in this kingdom is a grotesque predator. Between 200 and 1,000 meters deep, the ocean is home to one of its most surprising travelers, the lanternfish. This seemingly unassuming fish contains one of the most important links between the illuminated surface and the dark realm. During the day it remains in the shadows, but at nightfall it ascends en masse to shallower waters, following the plankton that migrates to feed. Then at dawn, he returns to his deep world like an actor leaving a performance. This back and forth not only ensures their survival, but also transports energy between the layers of the ocean, making it possible for life to circulate in an ecosystem where food is scarce. But if there's anything more intriguing than their daily routine, it's their intimate life. In an environment where finding a mate can be more difficult than finding food, reproduction demands extreme solutions. Males are much smaller than females, and when they finally find one, they can't risk losing it. Their strategy is drastic. They merge with it, literally. They attach themselves to her body, connecting their circulatory systems until they become an extension of the female. From that moment on, the male ceases to exist as an individual and becomes a constant provider of sperm, ensuring that the female can reproduce at any time. In these depths, love is not at all a romantic act, but rather a biological pact against loneliness and death. The small and seemingly fragile lanternfish also plays a vital role in the food chain. It serves as prey for giant squid, viperfish, and other creatures we've already seen on our descent. His destiny seems dictated by darkness, but even so, he has developed weapons and strategies that keep him in the game. Through these adaptations, this fish becomes a reminder that, in the deep, survival requires more ingenuity than strength. However, there's something else about them that piques our curiosity, something invisible to the naked eye, but which transforms this darkness into a fascinating spectacle. In the endless darkness, the lanternfish continues its journey. Its tiny body seems lost in the dark immensity, but something distinguishes it from any creature on the surface. How is it possible that there is light in a place where the sun never reaches? The answer is not magic, but chemistry, and its appearance forever transformed life in the deep. Millions of years ago, absolute darkness dominated these waters, and no ray of sunlight managed to penetrate more than 200 meters. In that endless world, finding food or a mate was a constant, almost miraculous challenge. In this extreme scenario, evolution found an unexpected resource. Producing its own light, and thus bioluminescence was born, a tool that made survival in the abyss possible. Today, most species that inhabit these depths utilize this ability. Each flash isn't just a flash. It conveys intent, allows for hunting, attracts a mate, or serves as a warning of imminent danger. But how is that light produced? Inside these fish, hidden beneath their scales, are photophores, specialized organs that function as authentic natural lamps. There, an enzyme called luciferase oxidizes a molecule called luciferin in the presence of oxygen. The result is a cool glow, usually blue or green, as these colors propagate better through water. Some species produce their own luciferin, while others rely on food for it, using bioluminescent prey to keep their light active. And it doesn't end there. Photophores are not simple bright spots, but complex structures that include reflective layers and biological lenses to focus and direct the glare. In some cases, it's not even the fish that produces the light. Certain species maintain an alliance with luminescent bacteria, housing them in special cavities and feeding them in exchange for a constant glow without expending energy. This chemical ingenuity gave rise to a silent war between prey and predators, a battle where light became a weapon and a deception. Predators like the viperfish have perfected deadly traps. From their fanged jaws emerges a flexible appendage that flickers intermittently, mimicking the silhouette of small prey. The goal is clear: to lure unsuspecting people into the trap just when there is no other reference in the darkness. Species like the lanternfish, on the other hand, use light for a completely different purpose. Their flashing lights aren't lures, but rather signals that allow individuals to communicate, coordinate movements in schools, or attract mates in complete darkness. Some sequences are so precise that they function as a language of their own, with each interval conveying a specific meaning. However, this technique is a double-edged sword. A flash at the wrong time can attract not only a female but also a predator. In the darkness, a lanternfish remains almost motionless, while its photophores light up in a precise sequence that cuts through the darkness like a luminous thread. The flashes attract copepods and small prey, which approach without perceiving the threat hidden in the shadows, and each light serves a function, coordinating movements with other individuals, guiding schools of fish, or attracting a mate. With calculated patience, the lanternfish captures a copepod, silently integrating itself into the web of abyssal life. Not far away, in the same darkness, the viperfish deploys its own strategy. A luminous filament mimics the movement of a small, defenseless fish, deceiving unsuspecting prey. Each flash acts as a carefully designed trap. As the victim approaches unsuspectingly, the predator launches its attack with lethal precision, ensuring its survival in an environment where every decision can mean life or death. This play of light is not a random spectacle, but the expression of deeply rooted adaptations. In a world without visual references, where food is scarce and every movement requires a high-energy expenditure, bioluminescence has become a universal language of the abyss. A flash can determine immediate survival, and millions of years of natural selection have shaped behaviors and entire bodies, favoring those who knew how to use light to thrive in the eternal night. And yet, light isn't the only feature that has challenged our imagination, because to survive here, it's not enough to shine. Flesh, bones, and even the very shape of the body have also had to transform. Some species developed enormous jaws, others had bodies so soft they resembled jelly, and some had facial features so strange they were inconceivable to human perception. Because in this terrain, darkness not only erases the sun, but also rewrites anatomy. Where the ocean crushes with an invisible force, life has learned to abandon the rigid and embrace the soft. Pressure increases by approximately 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth, and in the bathyal zone, this force accumulates to hundreds of atmospheres. Under such a weight, rigid structures such as bones or air-filled chambers would be unable to support it. They would fracture, collapse, or cease to function. The evolutionary response was simple and radical. abandoning rigidity and distributing pressure through elastic tissues, gelatinous bodies, and compressible organs allowed organisms to adapt to this extreme environment. Thus, the forms that seem otherworldly to us today were born. Let's take the slimy fish as our symbol. At first glance, its flabby flesh seems like a failure of natural selection, a mistreated creature. But in reality, it's the perfect solution. Its soft body, with a density slightly less than that of water, allows it to maintain buoyancy without expending energy, floating like a bag in slow currents while filtering or absorbing the remains of snow from the sea. Lacking a swim bladder, the slimefish avoids the danger of compression. Its gelatinous flesh distributes pressure evenly, and its skin acts as support tissue rather than armor. It is an anatomy designed to resist compression, not defy it. This same logic explains why, at greater depths, life forms become more exaggerated. Food scarcity drives selection toward organs that multiply capture opportunities. If the food is unusual, the mouth must be able to swallow anything it finds, regardless of its size or rarity. This is where expandable mouths and elastic stomachs come into play, adaptations that allow animals like slimy fish or deep-sea anglerfish to swallow disproportionately large prey. The teeth of the viperfish or the jaw of the swallow eel are extremes of the same strategy, maximizing any feeding opportunity. When food appears, you have to take advantage of it without hesitation. Pressure also promotes the loss of dense skeletons and the atrophy of air-dependent structures. Many deep-sea vertebrates have a less calcified skeleton, composed predominantly of cartilage or soft tissue that replaces bone at the surface. Sea cucumbers, jellyfish, and many sponges thrive because their gelatinous structure deforms without breaking under pressure. In practice, the molecule that sustains life in the deep is elasticity, not hardness. Adaptations to extreme pressure weren't enough on their own. In an environment where food was scarce, evolution favored the development of sensory limbs and hypertrophied organs that increased the likelihood of finding and capturing prey. Enormous eyes capable of capturing any blink, sensory whiskers that detect the slightest vibration, appendages that function as decoys. The lanternfish, in addition to its role in bioluminescence, exhibits jaws and teeth that look like disproportionate exaggerations, designed for grasping and holding. It's the rule of the abyss. When prey is rare, the capture tool must be exaggerated. Metabolisms also adapt. The lack of oxygen and food imposes slow rhythms. Many bathyal inhabitants reduce their metabolic rate to a minimum, moving slowly to conserve calories. Growth is slow, reproduction is sporadic, and longevity usually increases. This slow pace allows for investment in expensive structures such as expandable stomachs or specialized fabrics, because daily expenditure is kept under control. From a historical perspective, these forms didn't emerge overnight. The stable occupation of the deep began tens of millions of years ago. Fossil records and phylogenetic reconstructions indicate that during the late Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago, some marine lineages began exploring cooler, deeper niches as surface conditions changed. There, in the thermal stability and relative environmental constancy of the seabed, the conditions for slow and cumulative evolution were created. What we see today is the result of that prolonged experiment, generations upon generations perfecting the unimaginable. Not everything in this landscape is reduction or loss. Depth also functions as an invention workshop where evolution has explored unique solutions. Luminescent appendages allow them to communicate or attract prey. Bellows-like stomachs store any food opportunity. Translucent bodies make their silhouette difficult for visual predators to distinguish, and lipid-filled organs provide buoyancy without the risk of compression. Even the textures of flesh show surprising adaptations to life in the abyss. Gels and collagen networks are distributed throughout the body as natural shock absorbers, absorbing pressure that would otherwise damage internal organs. The tissues have replaced gas bubbles with lipid-filled sacs, allowing them to maintain buoyancy without the risk of collapsing under tons of pressure. Muscles, on the other hand, work slowly and steadily, optimizing each movement and ensuring the animal can react accurately when opportunities or threats arise. These adaptations are evident in the daily life of the abyss. A slimefish floats in the sediment like a pale bag, its gelatinous body gently undulating with the current, unaffected by pressure. A few meters away, a lanternfish advances silently, its silhouette outlined by rows of luminescent organs, its sharp teeth waiting to close on any prey that comes too close. A sea cucumber swims along the seafloor, pumping sediment and recycling nutrients that sustain other organisms in the ecosystem. At the same time, a jellyfish slowly descends with its tentacles spread out, its translucent, flexible shape adapting to the pressure so it can move without damage. Each creature demonstrates how millions of years of evolution have fine-tuned its anatomy and behavior to cope with the combination of pressure, food scarcity, and total absence of light. These creatures aren't natural failures. They're extreme solutions, stories of adaptation where rarity is an advantage. Every grotesque or apparently deformed form is, in reality, a triumph of biological engineering under conditions that defy human intuition. And when you look at these numbers, the question that arises is not how they survived, but how they perfected such specialized tactics. Because the history of these species doesn't end with passive adaptation. Some have transformed these rarities into authentic hunting weapons. What devices has evolution devised to hunt in absolute silence, and what forms of violence lurk in the darkness? In absolute darkness, where silence seems solid and the cold freezes even the slightest movement, there are eyes that watch and wait. Nothing moves randomly here. Every creature constantly assesses its surroundings. Every vibration in the water, every tiny flash of bioluminescence can decide between life and death, and vigilance is as crucial as patience. In this profound realm, survival has left superficial rules behind. Darkness is not a refuge, but a hunting ground where each predator has developed precise tools to capture anything that dares to cross its path. Whoever decides to attack does so with surgical precision, and a mistake is not paid for with hunger but with death. Thus, in the apparent calm of the abyss, the hunters of eternal night advance stealthily and lethal. A tiny light floats on the seafloor, so faint it seems impossible to detect. However, that spark is a deadly deception. It is carried by the deep-sea anglerfish, a predator that remains motionless for long periods, combining patience and strategy to make every movement lethal. From its forehead, a bioluminescent filament flickers with the exact cadence of a defenseless creature, luring unsuspecting prey into the trap. As its prey approaches, the predator calculates the perfect moment. In a split second, its jaws open explosively, its teeth rotate inward, and its elastic body stretches to engulf the prey whole. The action is lightning fast, a direct consequence of millions of years of evolution that have perfected every feature to survive in the abyss. Farther out, where pressure crushes metal and light never penetrates, another hunter patrols slowly, the dragonfish. Its long, slender body is covered with luminous organs that glow like a secret code. They aren't lights for everyone. Some flash red, a color invisible to most prey but not to him. And when something enters its range, its jaws open like an impossible trap. Its fangs are transparent, invisible until it's too late. But not everyone relies on hooks and flashes. Others have taken the idea of opportunism to the extreme. The gulper eel, for example, looks like a nightmare designed to swallow the abyss. Its enormous, disproportionate mouth opens like a living net capable of swallowing prey as large as itself. A single attack can mean weeks without the need to hunt again, and in these depths, that's the difference between persisting or disappearing. In this scenario, darkness is not a void, it is a canvas where life draws unimaginable strategies. Deceptive bioluminescence, mouths that open like chasms, folding jaws, bodies designed for a single perfect movement. Here, violence isn't constant, but when it comes, it's absolute. A flash, a vibration, and calm returns as if nothing had happened. Only the shadow of the hunter remains, waiting for the next opportunity. But even when the hunt is over and calm seems to reign, the abyss still holds secrets that defy our understanding. While predators dominate with absolute precision, vast expanses remain beyond human reach, protected by total darkness and crushing pressure. Only those capable of challenging these conditions will be able to glimpse what is happening beyond the limits of our perception. Beneath where predators reign, where the frenzy of the hunt dissolves into silence, lies a world that until recently was pure conjecture. There is no light here, and the pressure crushes any structure that is not made to support the weight of an entire ocean. This hostile environment made these depths an inaccessible territory for centuries, but today, for the first time, darkness opens before our eyes. Reaching these depths hasn't been easy. Human curiosity needed powerful allies, devices capable of defying extreme pressure and total darkness. ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, descend attached to umbilical cables, carrying cameras that can withstand thousands of meters of water and lights that barely touch the darkness for their inhabitants. Some manned submersibles, armored spheres of titanium, can withstand more than 1,000 atmospheres, allowing humans to traverse territories that for centuries existed only on maps and conjecture. Thanks to them, the Mariana Trench, almost 11,000 meters deep, ceased to be a myth and became a tangible coordinate. However, not everything is observed through lenses. Environmental DNA allows species to be identified by particles suspended in water, revealing the presence of creatures that would otherwise remain hidden. Each dive brings with it the same question: what life forms are hidden in this eternal silence? The first appearance emerges like a pulse floating in the darkness. The Dumbo octopus. Its translucent body seems suspended in the void, with mobile fins reminiscent of a child's ears. It does not chase its prey, but waits patiently, capturing worms or small crustaceans with minimal energy. Each movement, delicate and measured, is a lesson in economy in a world where food is scarce. When the ROV shines a light on it for a moment, the octopus dissolves into the darkness, like a comet gently disappearing from the night sky. As we descend into the deepest shadows of the abyss, a silhouette moves slowly among the sediments, like a vestige that has survived forgotten ages. The giant isopod reaches almost 0.5 meter, much more imposing than its relatives that measure just a few centimeters, and each movement reveals the solidity of an organism perfectly adapted to the darkness of the abyss. It lives in the bathyal zone between 600 and 2,000 meters deep, protected by a rigid armor of chitinous exoskeleton that protects it from the extreme forces of the abyss and from possible predators. This strength allows it to move safely along the seabed, supported by its 14 articulated legs and tracking debris that falls from the surface. whether fish, jellyfish fragments, or any vestige that breaks the mineral monotony of the bottom. Each movement is complemented by the activity of its antennae, which capture chemical signals imperceptible to us and guide it precisely toward the feasts hidden in the darkness. Thanks to its extremely slow metabolism and minimal energy expenditure strategy, it can survive long periods without food, making the most of every find and turning even death into sustenance for life. Each movement reveals a survival strategy adapted to scarcity. It ingests large quantities and stores reserves that allow it to sustain itself for weeks, demonstrating how extreme adaptation ensures the continuity of life in the most inhospitable depths. As the remains of the seafloor continue to be processed by this silent recycler, the abyssal darkness begins to reveal new presences. At altitudes ranging from 700 to 1,500 meters, a light and ethereal figure emerges from the darkness, revealing an unexpected life form in these depths. Its silhouette seems to float in the darkness, and with each movement, the darkness is illuminated in brief flashes that announce its presence. This intermittent luminosity is not a simple accident of the abyss, but a carefully adjusted strategy. This is the abyssal box jellyfish, a peculiar specimen that propels itself by rhythmic pulses while emitting blue flashes that blink like a secret code. Swarms of this creature organize themselves like living constellations, each flash luring tiny organisms into an invisible trap. What appears to be a hypnotic spectacle is, in reality, an elaborate hunting strategy. When prey gets too close, the stinging tentacles perform their function with lethal precision. On the ROV's screen, the phenomenon appears as an inverted starry sky, a firmament of lights hunting in complete darkness. But beyond this luminous spectacle, this translucent creature displays surprising efficiency. Its meticulously synchronized movements minimize energy expenditure in an environment where food is scarce. Its body, almost imperceptible in the dark, acts as a protective veil against potential predators, while its tentacles, loaded with highly specialized stinging cells, ensure the precise capture of small prey. The same precision that guides a single specimen is multiplied when several individuals join together. What in solitude seems like a silent dance transforms into a collective choreography that increases its chances of survival. Synchronized flashes allow swarms to stick together, and that cohesion becomes a vital resource in an ocean where isolation can be deadly. Every flickering light, every body moving in unison, is evidence of the intricate web of relationships that sustains life in these depths. A reminder that even in the most absolute darkness, cooperation and adaptation are essential. As the last bright lights fade into the darkness, the seafloor begins to come alive with a slow, stealthy movement. Among the sediments, a white shape covered in filaments moves patiently across the bottom. Known to biologists as the hairy sea cucumber, this strange creature primarily moves between 200 and 1,000 meters deep, traveling over seabeds rich in organic sediments. Its filaments not only propel it gently along the seafloor, but also oxygenate the substrate and help decompose matter, returning nutrients to the deep-sea ecosystem. Its slow, almost imperceptible movements keep it out of sight of predators such as deep-sea fish and certain opportunistic crustaceans that feed on any organism that passes near the seabed. However, this apparent vulnerability is offset by precise adaptations. Its flexible body, covered in filaments, allows it to filter sediment, avoid direct encounters with predators, and maximize the efficiency of its movement. Every advance, every movement of its appendages reflects millions of years of evolution that have perfected its ability to extract scarce food, and stay one step ahead of those stalking it. Thus, while the abyss remains an inhospitable world, this silent recycler demonstrates that survival in the depths depends on strategy, patience, and endurance, becoming a living witness to the persistence of life in extreme conditions. Each of these encounters reveals the same truth. Here, where life should be extinguished, it is reinvented in ways that border on the unreal. But the ROV's camera captures more than just scattered creatures. In the middle of an abyssal valley, a metallic structure emerges from the silt, the remains of a shipwreck colonized by sponges and anemones. An underwater cable laid out as an artificial line provides shelter for small crabs and lanternfish. Even in this extreme isolation, the human presence leaves signs that life is transforming into a home, and although the exploration comes to an end, the question persists, floating in the infinite darkness of these depths. What future awaits this hidden realm when the human footprint reaches its depths? From the shadows of the abyss, where pressure crushes everything we know, life seems like a closed cycle condemned to darkness. However, we have been able to observe that even here, in the immobility of the bottom, the impulse that will feed the light on the surface is being formed. On the cold, muddy sand, debris slowly accumulates from the upper layers, a marine snow composed of fragments of organisms, scales, and excrement. And there, where there seems to be nothing, an invisible army works tirelessly. Deep-sea crabs move through the sediment, devouring everything they find, while chemolithotrophic bacteria decompose bones, flesh, and offal. In this process, essential compounds are released: nitrogen, phosphorus, iron. They are chemical fragments of life, invisible, but with the power to ignite an entire ocean. What for some organisms begins with death, whether from a predator or the simple wear and tear of disease, becomes the basis for a broader principle that sustains life in the ocean. From this invisible legacy, the released nutrients don't remain motionless on the seafloor. Slowly, the cold currents originating in the bathyal zone collect them and begin an imperceptible rise. The water, charged with vital energy, advances like a silent river toward the surface, driven by the upwellings that dominate regions like the North Sea. For days that turn into weeks, these currents carry away the hidden wealth, returning to the open ocean that which was generated in the darkness. When sunlight finally arrives, the sea changes completely, and on the surface, the response is immediate. Microscopic plant organisms, phytoplankton, multiply frantically, turning the waters green. With each explosion of life, a chain reaction begins. Phytoplankton capture sunlight and carbon, and in return release oxygen to the point of producing almost half of what we breathe on the planet. But their mission in this cycle doesn't end there, as each cell is food for zooplankton, such as tiny copepods, which silently sustain millions of creatures. In this scenario, the star of these waters appears, the Atlantic herring. Millions of silver bodies move forward together in gigantic banks, reflecting the light like a moving mirror. Their streamlined bodies, quick reflexes, and synchronized swimming are the result of millions of years of adaptation to the temporary abundance brought by upwellings. By feeding on copepods and larvae, the herring becomes the middle piece in a chain that connects the smaller to the larger. But abundance never goes unnoticed. From the sky, gannets detect the metallic sheen of the shoals. They soar, glide, and suddenly plummet at over 100 kilometers per hour, breaking the surface in search of a fish. Underwater, swift and agile seals race between the schools, forcing them to compact into a defensive sphere pulsing with thousands of lives. It's a wild ballet, older than life on Earth, where every second decides who lives and who dies. And then, from the depths, the shadow of a giant emerges. A whale breaches the bank, its mouth opening like a crevice, swallowing hundreds of herring in a single lunge. Its presence is brief, powerful, and as it dives again, the sea becomes agitated, witness to the link between what seems unconnected, the colossus that feeds on tiny creatures thanks to a cycle that began in the organic dust of the abyss. Every particle that falls, every bacteria that works in the dark, every current that rises, sustains the life that develops under the sun. The entire ocean pulsates like an indivisible organism, where death in the abyss nourishes the vitality of the surface and gives meaning to the light. In this delicate balance, where each element plays its role with millimetric precision, an order that borders on perfection is revealed. What invisible force created this architecture? How does the planet manage to maintain such a subtle balance in all its dimensions? Everything seems to fit together perfectly. The herring move forward in sync, the birds trace patterns in the air, and the currents gently shape the surface. Each movement links to the next as if a secret cadence dictates the harmony of life, showing that even in chaos, there is a silent design that sustains wholeness. And while the surface calms and the light reflects on the immensity of the sea, the depths remain alive, a secret and limitless world where every creature, no matter how small, plays a vital role in this vast symphony. The ocean breathes, and with it the entire planet continues to beat, reminding us that life in the darkness sustains everything we see under the sun.